An unfortunately all too common way to lose your autonomy and stop living before you die, and to die sooner and more painfully, is to suffer an osteoporotic fracture in your old age. The time to prevent that from happening to you in your 80s is right now. And it's not about calcium, vitamin D, or even bone mineral density. Most of what you've heard about bone health as you age is wrong or just not enough. Let's change that, because the world needs you to show up more as you get older, not less. You're listening to the Health Courage Collective podcast, episode 231, What I Didn't Know Before About Building Bones That Don't Break. Welcome to the Health Courage Collective podcast, the show for women who are too busy to slog through hours of generalized, inapplicable, and often contradictory health information, but too smart to ignore that a few minutes of focused attention now can prevent years of suffering in the future. I'm your host, Christina Hackett, a pharmacist who doesn't want you to live on prescriptions, a certified coach specifically trained to maximize your potential, and a compulsive learner obsessed with preventative, cutting-edge, holistic, and integrative medicine. I'm on a mission to increase your physical and mental resilience so you can fearlessly look forward to your next 40-plus limitless years. Your time is now. Let's go. Hello, my friend. It's great to have you here today. I hope you've had a great week. I'm sure you haven't been able to eat or sleep or focus because you've been so anxiously anticipating completing our discussion about bone health as you age, right? Today, we're continuing on from last week. If you remember, we started talking about blowing glass and how after it's shaped, glass has to be annealed in an annealing kiln so the outer layer doesn't harden too much before the inner layers are strong enough. Both the inner and the outer layers need to be in sync or the glass will crack. And we talked about how common osteoporosis is, how much more common and rapidly it occurs in women than men, and how a bone fracture in an elderly person usually leads to a quicker death and loss of independence before she dies. We ended with the question, if calcium, vitamin D, and bisphosphonate medications are not the best thing to protect your bones as you age, what is? In his book, Estrogen Matters, Dr. Avram Blooming is very adamant that postmenopausal osteoporosis is a case of loss of resilience or tensile strength in the inner portion of the bone. That's why increasing bone mineral density, the outer shell of the bone, isn't the right strategy. He says that postmenopausal women taking estrogen have a 35 to 50% reduction in the likelihood of bone fracture. He thinks that the main cause for the loss of tensile strength inside the bone, that resilient structure that allows bones to bend a little bit, is a decline in estrogen and progesterone levels. The catch is that estrogen and progesterone help keep your bones resilient as long as you have them, meaning if you follow conventional medical advice to take the lowest possible dose for the shortest possible duration, you're only helping your bones a little bit for a little while. It's a case of, as Kristen Johnson and Maria Claps say in The Great Menopause Myth, not that our hormones are declining because we're aging, but that we're aging because our hormones are declining. Our bones get older and more fragile as they lose estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone. Taking hormones for a few years in your 50s to take the edge off menopausal symptoms and then stopping, which is what is widely recommended as the standard of care, only gives you a tiny bit of bone protection. Same with brain protection, by the way, and cardiovascular protection. Taking prolonged hormone replacement, like for more than 5 years, gives you more, but it fades away within 6 years of stopping the hormone treatment. The longer you take hormone replacement, the lower your risk of fractures. Basically, the least amount of time you're estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone deprived compared to the levels in your 30s or 40s, the lower your risk of osteoporotic fracture. The ideal for your bones would be to start around the time of perimenopause and keep taking them forever. Something else interesting Dr. Blooming says is that weight training without adequate hormone levels does not improve bone resilience. I followed the footnotes in his book to 2 medical journal citations, I'll put them in the show notes if you're interested, but I couldn't get the full articles. At least not without driving to the medical library and getting a physical copy of the journal, which could be a fun thing to do for old time's sake. I don't even know if it works that way anymore, but that's what I used to do when I was in school. Both of these journal articles that he cites are from 1991, so take it with a grain of salt. He says that while weight training is of, quote, undeniable benefit, it does not improve bone flexibility in postmenopausal women who are not taking hormone replacement therapy. That's news to me, and if it's true, which I'm not entirely sure it is, it's huge because weight training is the most important thing you can do to not have to stop living before you die. But if you're sacrificing bone resilience benefit by not having adequate hormones on board while you weight train, your most powerful tool is way less powerful. It's like going into battle with tarnished Wonder Woman bracelets and no lasso. Besides weightlifting, which is the best thing you can be doing for your current and future health, high impact stuff like jumping also strengthens your bones. Low impact activities like swimming and cycling have their merits, but bone strengthening is not one of them. Even running doesn't strengthen your bones, which I find interesting. A study of bone mineral density, which is what we just talked about as not being the metric we're looking to improve, so keep that in mind, showed that of sedentary people, swimmers, weightlifters, runners, cyclers, and gymnasts, the swimmers and cyclers had lower bone density than the sedentary people. The runners were the same as the sedentary people. The weightlifters were much better than the sedentary people, and the gymnasts were by far the best. So lifting weights and absorbing impacts like from jumping and any kind of gymnastic movements you can do strengthens your bones. But maybe not as much as you think if you don't have hormones on board. Something else to consider when hooking your future self up is that what really matters is fractures or fracture risk. I've always thought of bone mineral density as a perfect approximation of that risk. But we know now that I was wrong about that. It's not. It's not worthless, but it's not the full picture. When we're thinking about fracture prevention, yes, you want minerally dense bones, and even more so, you want healthy, resilient bones with good inner tensile strength. But perhaps just as important as that, you want to not fall down. It feels kind of silly to be worried about fall prevention right now in this stage of life. There's that old joke about you're old when instead of laughing at you, everybody panics if you fall. Falls are such a big deal when you're elderly and a humongous cause of people stopping living before they die. There are professionals who can come evaluate your house for fall risks when you're old and talk about grab bars and such. That stuff can wait, but other kinds of fall prevention should start now, way before you falling down would incite a panic. This means doing some kind of healthy movement activity that will benefit you now and that also requires some balance. Training your balance in whatever way is most fun for you now, and then maintaining that above average balance will serve you so well for the rest of your life. It could be the difference between you being able to live on your own or not someday. An old lady with osteopenia and impeccable balance will be way less likely to suffer a life-shortening fracture than an old lady with normal bone density and poor balance. In episode 184, we talked about the body part that gives you anti-aging superpowers. Do you remember what it is? Which muscles should you focus on buffing up to live better as you age, but specifically to help prevent falls? Your toes. Strong toes might be your greatest asset for preventing a fall when you're older. Strong feet in general. Of course, you need other functional muscles as well, but having strong and stable feet that are able to keep you upright and quickly correct for missteps will do a ton for preventing falls and their associated fractures as you age. Also, having an upright posture helps you see more of your environment around you, which helps a lot in preventing falls, in addition to maintaining your balance and correcting your eyesight and hearing so you can receive all of the sensory information around you is important for preventing falls. You can go back and listen to my episode 127 if you want more detail about the minerals and vitamins you need to improve your bone density. I think it's still valuable to know and do, but remember that osteoporosis is not osteomalacia, and it shouldn't be treated like it is. Postmenopausal bone fracture risk is less about bone minerals and hardening the outer shell of the bone, and more about improving the internal structure of trabecular bone, the inner matrix, the ability of the bones to bend a little bit under load and not break. There's also a very cool machine called OsteoStrong that can help improve bone strength by mechanically bending your bones just a little bit to make them stronger and more able to withstand a load. So that's a great option, but finding a clinic with an OsteoStrong machine could be a bit challenging. There are also certain conditions and habits that predispose women to osteoporosis and fractures as they age. We'll save that to talk about another time. Send me a message if you want that time to come sooner rather than later. I'd be happy to do that. It's a medical fact that taking estrogen after your natural estrogen levels decline around the time of perimenopause improves your bone strength and reduces your risk of fractures. Nobody debates this, even people who oppose the use of hormone replacement therapy. Progesterone and testosterone are also important for your bone health. And the benefits of hormones are less about bone mineral density and more about inner matrix bone tensile strength, which is not something you can measure. Well, not without breaking your bone to see how much force it took. Not a test I would sign up for. You don't have to take hormones if you don't want to. If you understand the whole hormone picture and decide they're just not for you, that's totally fine. Just know that calcium and vitamin D are not a substitution for the benefits of estrogen, progesterone, and testosterone that they give to your bones. And neither are bisphosphonate medications. And it may or may not be true that even weight training won't give you the full benefits you would get if you had hormones on board while you lifted weights. Remember the annealing furnace where we put our glass for 24 hours after we blew it? It would have been way more convenient and way more fun for everyone involved if my husband and I could have just taken our glass that we blew home with us when we were done. But we had to drive clear back downtown the next day, and some people have to have their fragile creations shipped to them later because they can't come back. It's annoying, but it's what you have to do because an outer layer of glass that hardens without the inner layers being strong enough will crack and ruin the piece. Strong rigidity on the outside of your bones, but no tensile strength inside, is still a bone that can easily crack or snap. That's why minerals aren't enough. Good tensile strength, but no outer mineralization is osteomalacia, or rickets. You need both the inner tensile strength and the outer mineralization. And for elderly women, the inner tensile strength is probably more important for fracture prevention. Actually, I take that back. Not more important, but more likely to be the problem and more difficult to correct. Worthy of more intentional attention, which it does not get from traditional medicine. If you were to come to my house and throw my cute glass rocker cups and decanter at the wall, then you'd be a horrible friend and I would never ask you to come over and play again. But I imagine they would easily shatter into big, dangerous shards. They're probably as fragile as a Dale Chihuly sculpture that you wouldn't put in a high-traffic area. Fragile things need a lot of protecting, and they're not super functional. Remember, I can't put my dishes in the dishwasher. You have to worry about their safety all the time. But we all have functional glass that is in high traffic areas and even right in front of our faces as we hurl ourselves down the highway at 70 miles an hour. If you take annealed glass and temper it, it becomes way stronger than annealed glass. Tempering is a series of specific heating and rapid cooling processes that can only be done on previously annealed glass. Then that glass is way stronger and less likely to break. And the breaks are usually less dangerous, like it doesn't break into big, sharp shards. Tempered glass is sometimes called safety glass. It's more resilient and has been specifically prepared to withstand more force and less delicate handling. Tempered glass can serve a lot of purposes without you having to micromanage its risks and worry about it all the time. If you have strong bones and a low risk for falling, you can also be more resilient and independent. But true bone strength is a combination of both outer mineral density and inner tensile strength. Osteoporosis is not osteomalacia. The biggest ways to increase your inner tensile strength are to move heavy loads that strain your bones so much that they have to bend a tiny bit, and to have youthful levels of hormones, especially estrogen. That's why different bone strengthening options are not created equal. Calcium and vitamin D absolutely do not do the same thing estrogen does for your bone resilience. They are part of bone health, especially vital for kids and teenagers, but they're not enough on their own to decrease your risk of a catastrophic fracture as you get older. Bone resilience and inner tensile strength is extremely difficult to increase as you get older, but it's not hard to maintain. So the time to decrease your elderly lady fracture risk is right now. Lift really heavy stuff, safely and properly, of course. Jump around, safely and properly, of course. And consider what you want to do about your declining hormones as your natural levels fall in your 40s and 50s. Remember that bone mineral density isn't the only measure of bone strength or fracture risk. It's not even the most important part. It's just the only one we can easily measure. Thank you so much for being here today. I hope this helps you think about how to not be frighteningly fragile as you age. And remember that there is so much more to preventing fractures than just a hard outer shell on your bones. Next week, we're going to talk about what to do with perimenopausal emotions. Until then, bend your bones and don't be normal. Thank you so much for tuning into the Health Courage Collective podcast. I am truly honored that you have paid me the enormous compliment of your time and attention. I would be so grateful if you would share this podcast with someone you know and subscribe so you never miss an episode. This podcast is for entertainment and information purposes only. Statements and views on this podcast are not medical advice. This podcast, including Christina Hackett and producers, disclaim responsibility for any possible adverse events by use of information contained herein. If you think you have a medical problem, consult a licensed physician.